Today we're continuing on with our NHL offseason review series. We're still covering teams in the Atlantic Division, and today we're analyzing the Florida Panthers. We're going to review the moves they make and determine what their future holds for next season. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're taking a look at the Florida Panthers offseason. We're reviewing the moves they've made, how the team has changed, players going in and out, and determining if they have anything left to do this offseason and where things stand as far as their improvements, or if they set back, or where do things stand with where the team is right now in regards to the last season. Now, first up, I want to take a look and see what their objectives were so that we can determine, did they accomplish what they set out to do? Now, first up, I think it's fair to say that the Panthers really had a solid year last year. Like, they ended up in a division, of course, all unique divisions last year because of the pandemic and regional-based games. But, Florida really was one of the top teams in the NHL last year. And I think it's fair to say that heading into this offseason, they wanted to continue to build off that and see if they could take things a step further. Of course, they ran into their state rivals in the Lightning in the playoffs, and that really kind of, set things back for an early exit, and even though they had an excellent season. And obviously, I think it's fair to say that the expansion draft was huge for them because they didn't know if they were going to lose Chris Driedger as a UFA. Was he going to Seattle? How was that all going to play out? And also, I think they wanted to kind of cut some dead weight, kind of trim the fat, if you will, to kind of move on from some unfavorable contracts that they weren't fond of anymore so that this team could continue to taking steps forward. So now we're going to analyze the moves they've made this offseason between trades, expansion draft, and as well as signings and re-signings and all that kind of stuff to see where this roster sits now compared to where it was at last season. Now, we did see some interesting trades. They were able to move on from Anton Strawman. They basically gave him away to the Arizona Coyotes, and they convinced him to waive his no move in the process. So Strawman, who had a lot of control over the situation, basically agreed to play ball with them and move on to the Coyotes. So for that, I would say Florida should be pretty grateful. Of course, they also made a trade, a big one, acquiring Sam Reinhart from Buffalo in exchange for a first-round conditional pick for next year, as well as a goaltending prospect, Devin Levi. Devin Levi is a good goalie prospect, don't get me wrong, but when you have Bobrovsky locked up on a long-term deal and you've got Spencer Knight waiting in the wings who even could take over the starting role as early as this year, really, even because, just because Bob has a bigger contract doesn't mean that he's not going to play, as many games. So we'll have to see about that. But either way, their goaltending situation is pretty well spoken for here. Plus, they have Samuel Montembeault in the organization, so it's not like they absolutely had to, keep another one here in the prospect pool for the goaltending for the future. So to me, it's a player they can do without. A first-round pick for Reinhardt's more than fair. He's a solid player. Can play center, can play wing. Played center mostly last year and really did well. And this team is just going to get that much deeper with him in their lineup. Now, it's hard to imagine exactly where they're going to slot everybody here, but certainly Reinhardt is a pretty significant addition here, in my opinion. Now, those were the only trades we saw, but we also saw a substantial buyout moving on from longtime defenseman Keith Yandle. Yandle gets bought out. Of course, the current Ironman streak holder in the NHL basically fell out of favor going into camp last year. His teammates kind of spoke up for him, and the Panthers ended up playing him all regular season games to continue on his streak. But it was apparent, especially into the playoffs, that they were ready to move on. He ended up getting scratched in the playoffs, and as much as he can still play, he's not living up to the contract. He's not giving you the offense he needs. Not solid defensively. So for the amount of money he was making, he kind of became a cap casualty, but now he's able to go sign a cheap deal to play with the Philadelphia Flyers, and he should be able to play a smaller role for a smaller paycheck, and it should all work out for him. But Yandle definitely has moved on from, and of course they lost Chris Driedger, who signed with Seattle, so that worked out well for them, that they didn't lose an additional player. As much as Driedger's been a good goaltending piece for them for the past couple seasons, between Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight, it was obvious that he wasn't coming back. So the fact that he signed with Seattle and that counted for their expansion draft loss was a huge win for them. As much as they, would have probably liked to have been able to trade him and get something back, it just wasn't in the cards given where the contract status was around all of their goalies. So either way, to me, this was, a pretty solid offseason all around when it comes to their trades and buyouts and the expansion draft. Now, when it comes to contracts. Now, signings, we're going to look at players that re-signed and other deals that they made here throughout the offseason. And we're going to discuss players that have vacated the team as well through the free agent pool. Now, when it comes to re-signings, they made several contracts here. I mean, they re-signed a couple defensemen in Brandon Montour and Gustav Forsling, both guys who they acquired in pretty decent pickups here. I mean, Forsling was a waiver wire claim. Montour was a trade chip that they picked up from Buffalo last year. Ends up re-upping there. So they both get 3-year deals. Montour gets 3.5. Forsling gets 2.6. I mean, those are pretty reasonable, solid contracts for what they're going to give you on the back end. So Florida's blue line just get that much better. Of course, they'll have a healthy Aaron Ekblad, who they missed dearly in the playoffs as well. Mackenzie Weegar had a big season last year, really stepped up his game. So, those are your 4 defensemen right there going to play a significant role. And overall, those re-signings were pretty good. They're a good piece of work there by Bill Zito. They re-signed Anthony Duclair, 3 years times $3 million. Not a bad contract. Again, he had a good year in Ottawa 2 years ago. They didn't want to give him the money he was looking for after that, so he goes to Florida. Had another solid year, point production-wise. And he gets it 3 times 3, which is, like I said, fair deal. Nothing too crazy or expensive here. And he should continue to play and fit in with their systems here for the next few years. Of course, they re-signed Sam Reinhart after acquiring him in that trade. That was just announced here today. He gets $6.5 million over a 3-year term. So, 6.5 AAV for Reinhart. Still, again, nice piece of business there by Bill Zito. I've been pretty fond of the majority of the moves they've made. Of course, they had to re-sign Sam Bennett, who, of course, was recently acquired near the NHL deadline, heading into last year's end of season into the playoffs. And, of course, Reinhart and Bennett, 2 former high first-round picks, taken in the same draft, now on the same team. Bennett gets a 4-year deal at $4.4 million. So maybe it's hard to say, that one I thought might be a little too much given Bennett's lack of production in Calgary, but look at how he's played in Florida. He's been given an entirely different role, and he's really taken off. So to me, it has a lot of potential to be a good contract as well. And of course, Carter Verhaeghe, who was what you'd call found money for them last year, still has 1 more year left on his deal, but they gave him an extension already, locking him up after having a real solid year for them last year. He gets an extra 3 years at 4.1. Now, that one I have a little bit of concerns about. It's not super long. It's not super expensive. But as much as Verhaeghe had a good year last year, it's 1 season. And they're a pretty deep team. So depending on how he plays and how his role could be adjusted, it might be challenging for him to keep up that production. I do have some minor concerns over that deal. Overall, it's not that bad, really. But it's only because he hasn't had a longer period of time to be established. That's my only concern when it comes to Verhaeghe. But if he can keep up playing like he did last year, it should be a terrific deal, and in fact might look like a steal down the road. Now, besides the players that we've talked about here already that have left the organization, which of course includes Yandel and Strawman on the blue line, we also saw a few other guys vacate as well via free agency that have not been re-signed. That's Alex Wennberg, who moved on to Seattle, and of course Nikita Gusev, who they brought in late last year after he left the Devils organization. He hasn't been re-signed either, and he hasn't signed anywhere. So I'm not sure what the future holds for Gusev. And of course, goaltender Chris Driedger also, like I said, goes to Seattle. So overall, they really didn't bring in a ton of new players. They got rid of the contracts that they wanted to with Strawman and Yandel. They knew they were losing Driedger, so they helped make that work for the expansion draft, which was great. And then otherwise, there's really not much that's really changed a whole lot outside of bringing in Sam Reinhart, who can more than replace what they had on Alex Wennberg. So has this team have any unfinished business left this offseason? And say, you know what, for the most part, Florida knows what their team's going to look like next year. There's really nothing too major that's going to make additions or subtractions for the current team roster for the coming season. But one piece of business that I think they'd like to get ahead of and would like to get out of the way would be extending captain Alexander Barkov. Barkov's entering the final year of his contract, which also looks like a pretty good bargain deal right now. I don't know if they really want to wait to see how things go. To me, I'd get him extended as soon as possible. He's only 26 years old. He's a young guy who's had a lot of experience early, been a captain early in his career, and is a huge part of that team. To me, that should be a top priority between now and camp to see if you can get that figured out and get a longer-term extension in place for your team captain. But otherwise, I think you know what this team is going to be. You know who the forwards are going to be for the most part. You have a few spots that are up for grabs in camp, but nothing too surprising there. You know who your defensemen are. You know who your goalies are. Like, there's really not a great deal of surprises with this franchise. I mean, they're a real solid team. To me, they could be a real contender for the Atlantic Division title. They could be a contender for a deep playoff run here. I mean, they're young too. This team has had a lot of good things done in the last couple of years by Bill Zito since he's been the GM. Their average age at each position between forward, D, and goalie is 26, which is great. I mean, they have a lot of youth. They don't have hardly anybody that's an older player. There's like Bobrovsky's a little bit older, but like generally speaking, their main pieces are all like mid-20s and under. So like this team could be in a situation where they might just have the window starting to open and be able to have an opportunity here where they can contend for the next few years. But my main concern is between the pipes. You've got Sergei Bobrovsky, who's paid big bucks but been very inconsistent. And then you've got Spencer Knight, who's got a ton of potential. I'd probably have more faith in him than Bobrovsky, but he's so young and inexperienced, even though he did well last year when he did play. In his brief amount of time, he looked real good. But can he keep that up? That's the question. And when somebody's so inexperienced, it's hard to be able to say you can bank on it. So we'll have to see how things go. So that's my only real concern for them, how we're going into the next NHL season. So has this team gotten worse? Are they better? Are they about the same as last year? To me, I'm going to say they're probably about the same with the potential to be slightly better. And the reason I'm saying maybe slightly better is because of the addition of Sam Reinhart. But at the same time, like I said, the goaltending, you take away Driedger, which means Bobrovsky's going to have to play more. You get the inexperienced Spencer Knight, but who's also has real solid potential to be an elite goalie. Like, if Knight plays up to his potential right away with the addition of Reinhart, I think they could be a little bit better and really give teams like Tampa that much more of a run here. So this is going to be a strong team to contend with, and I'll be interested to see what they can accomplish next season. So, of course, as always, we'll know your thoughts on the Florida Panthers organization. What do you think of their moves from this offseason? Do you think there's any other unfinished business here besides extending Barkov? And do you think they're better, worse, or about the same going into the upcoming NHL season? Let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.